Hello, everybody, and welcome to Inorganic Career Chats, a new video series by the ACS's Division of Inorganic Chemistry. In this video series, we'll chat with people from industry, national lab, and government about their career trajectories in inorganic chemistry. I'm your host, Sam Johnson, and I'm a staff scientist at PNNL. Today, we'll be talking to William Morris, the Director of Research and Development at NuMat Technologies. He's also the recipient of the DIC's Early Career Industrial Investigator Award. So, William, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time. To get started, can you tell us a little bit about your academic background, your graduate, undergraduate work, and your postdoc?
Yeah, of course. And thank you for this opportunity to speak with everybody. So, sort of my academic background, I spent, over 10 years in academia. I was an undergraduate at the University of Manchester. I actually studied abroad during that time in my junior year at Arizona State, and then went back for my senior year at the University of Manchester. Both of those, in my junior year and my senior year, I was really lucky in that I had two great lab experiences. They really gave me the sort of independence to get a feel for what it's like to be an inorganic chemist. That was actually physical organic chemistry, followed up by some lanthanide chemistry. Kind of inspired me, I would say, to go to graduate school. I really enjoyed being in the lab, wanted to continue that trajectory. I also, in my time at Arizona State, I really enjoyed my time in the US, and I saw graduate school as an opportunity to come back to the United States and continue my studies. So in 2008, I came to UCLA. I honestly didn't know who I was going to work for at UCLA. I just knew it was a great school with some really good inorganic chemists. The first person I met with was Omar Yagi. He was super enthusiastic, really sold me on what his lab was doing in terms of new material discovery, discussed like metal organic frameworks, covalent organic frameworks. This was chemistry I wasn't familiar with as an undergraduate. I'm certainly very familiar with it now. So in Omar's lab, I spent 5 years doing new material discovery. I really focused in on making frameworks that were chemically stable. Kind of when I started my PhD, the sort of perception about MOFs is that they were only stable under select conditions. I focused in on making chemically stable frameworks. This is because we wanted to do chemistry in the pores. And we did some of the first post-modification with both organic units and metals inside the pores of MOFs. Omar's lab was great as well because it gave me the opportunity to do presentations. Going into my graduate career, I'd probably given one presentation. I know it was a fumbling mess. So it gave me a lot of the chances to improve my presentation skills. I worked on papers, had lots of opportunities to travel, and also enjoyed opportunities to work with undergraduate chemists that were in the lab on a variety of projects. Postdoc, I moved on to Northwestern, worked in Chad Merkin's lab. Chad's lab is exceptional because it's such a large lab. There's so many people in the lab working on a broad range of projects. I kind of touched on a lot of projects doing lithography, some assembly work. I even worked on metal organic frameworks there. And it was really nice to be part of a multidisciplinary team. We had not just inorganic chemists, but we had a broad range of chemistry training within the lab, and also biologists, physicists. So that was great to be there. So that's a sort of brief introduction on my academic career.
That's a really strong background in all types of materials chemistry. So
Yeah.
I guess in some sense, it's no surprise that you wanted to continue in this way. You started at NuMat in 2015. How did you decide you wanted to go to NuMat?
So it was a really great chance to leverage the skills that I learned during my PhD and postdoc. First, the MOF training that I had, but also working at a small company as well. That was attractive because it gave me a lot of opportunities to leverage those skills in terms of presentations, travel. There was expectations that, I wouldn't just be in the lab at the bench. I would be doing kind of this diverse role. So they're kind of the two primary reasons. I would also say it was a huge benefit to be like truthfully staying in Chicago, because there was a variety of reasons why I wanted to stay in Chicago. I've really enjoyed my time in Chicago. So that was probably the third reason outside of the sort of interest to continue to pursue the chemistry.
So when you when you were working through your postdoc, was it your intent to stay in industry or did you sort of explore other fields as well?
No, so going into my postdoc, I certainly wanted to go into academia. I don't think that's a big secret. I spent 1 year looking for academic jobs. I had several interviews. However, I wasn't successful. I I thought at the time about continuing on that sort of academic trajectory, but there was this opportunity at NuMat. It seemed, like a really good, exciting opportunity to go and look at, hey, can we commercialize these materials that you spent your PhD working on? So that there was that aspect of, let's try something different. And there was this, if it doesn't work out, you can always take a step backward into, well, maybe not a step backward, you can take a step into academia.
A
I guess.
lateral move.
um, I'd still be leveraging a lot of the skills that I had in academia and maturing those skills. Um, in hindsight, I am super happy that I made that choice. It's been fantastic working on the commercialization of materials.
That's awesome. Sometimes I think that's one of the things I've learned is that careers are winding and long and can take some funny directions, but a lot of times it's for the better, you know.
Yeah, certainly.
So can you describe an average day? You've had several roles at NuMat. Can you describe an average day for you now and how that's sort of changed over time? How close is it to the sort of academic style research you were doing as a graduate student and a postdoc?
Yeah, so I've had kind of three roles at NuMat in my time. I've been here for 8 years at this point. So kind of, and they've evolved as like it wasn't like a hard cut off, like you're transitioning from one role to the second role to the third role. It's been a slow, gradual transition of kind of what the job responsibilities are. But I started at the lab bench and I was essentially spending, my hours in the lab designing experiments, generating hypotheses, synthesizing MOFs, testing MOFs. Uh, where I would say, so that was that you can draw parallels with what I did in my academic career. Now, where the lab work diverged was, okay, now you've got to scale this MOF, you've got to integrate it into a solution. It was still lab work, but it's very different in the way that we think about this from an academic perspective. So the lab bench work, I would draw parallels with being a graduate student or a postdoc. I then transitioned more into a sort of management role of the people that were in the lab, which was fantastic. I got to leverage some of those early skills that I developed in Omar's group, in Chad's group, in terms of working with undergraduate trained chemists, giving presentations. Now that was a little bit different because ultimately I was working with people on the business team at NuMat instead of like an academic professor. So maybe the deliverables for projects were different when you were considering we're putting this into an industrial solution versus we're writing an academic paper. So my final role has really been more business focused, and this is a new role for me at NuMat. I've been doing this for about 6 months at this time. I would say I am much more in terms of interfacing with potential customers. So I have a solid understanding of the MOF technology at this point and what it can do. So I'm going out talking with potential partners. That's, the federal government. We do a lot of work with the federal government. It's also talking to small and large companies about what our technology can do. It's then coming back and talking to our technical team, putting projects in place. So each role has been different, I would say, but it's slowly evolved over time. It wasn't like you were doing this one day. It was kind of like you're taking on these different roles and responsibilities. And that's one of the nice things about being at a small company is it gives you these opportunities for growth.
I think that can be a bit daunting though for especially graduate students or young graduate students or postdocs. How did you gain the roles that you needed for this new role in business or on the more, business side of science?
Yeah, so it's been a learning process, right? This hasn't happened overnight. I've been 8 years at NuMat, and I've had the fun opportunity to work with some fantastic business people. There's a lot of experience. Like NuMat's done a really good job of pairing industrial knowledgeable people with academic people like myself, and that transfer of skills, right? So it's learning from those that are around you. It's still leveraging some of those skills, right? Like giving a presentation is the same whether you're giving it to an academic audience versus a business audience. So it's leveraging those existing skills and leaning on the skill sets that are at NuMat. And, everybody is, enthusiastic at a small company for it to succeed, and they help you out.
Do you ever find that you miss the bench?
Oh yeah, totally. I definitely miss the bench. Like it was definitely a big challenge, right? Like having like there's always a time when you're like, oh, I could do it quicker, faster, but that's really not the truth when you think about it. Like working with a team is much
Yeah.
more productive, right? At the end of the day, like the team brings a wide range of skills, more man hours. So I do definitely miss the bench, and there's times when you're like, well, I could do this quicker, but that's kind of the wrong attitude, and
Right,
something
right.
that definitely thought about and been made aware of.
Let everybody shine where they need to shine and, and do what they do best. So as I guess, are there skills that students who may be interested in industry, what should they be seeking out? What sort of training? Are there things that you think back, man, I wish I would have done that in graduate school?
So I would say all of those skills that I emphasized up front in terms of the things that take you away from the bench, right? Like you need to be a solid bench chemist, but all of those additional skills that I learned, I wasn't learning with them with the goal of going into industry. I was learning them because I was given those opportunities by two PhD advisors who gave me a lot of independence. They were like, write the paper, that's good for your writing skills. They do this presentation, that improves your presentation skills, right? So I would encourage people to think more proactively about those skills, like go to the conference, give the presentation. It can be daunting as a graduate student, as a postdoc, but your future self will thank you, right? And then I think I've kind of alluded to this, right? Like I was lucky that I was at Northwestern. NuMat was recruiting for Northwestern. I wasn't strategic very much really in my job search. I think people can be more strategic in their job search, and it starts with the like networking, right? Like so uh, it pains me to say this, but get on LinkedIn, get to meet people, build a network, right? These are all really important when you start to think about your job search. There's certainly things that I didn't do. I don't think I got a LinkedIn profile probably until I joined NuMat, right?
Yeah.
The networking, right? Like go and say hi to a few people at a conference. You'll never know who you'll meet. Like I wasn't very good at those kind of things. So that's the kind of skills that I would emphasize people, build upon. Now, I was lucky because Northwestern had a good program for placing people in industry. Not all colleges, universities have those systems in place.
Where that, I guess, brings me to really my next question is, where do students look for those non-academic jobs, especially in the absence of some sort of strong program like the one you found at Northwestern?
I think it's really hard, right? That is 100% the truth. There's no one source of job. There's not a site you can go to and just type in PhD chemist and it spits out all the potential jobs that you want to do. That's coupled with you can do an amazingly diverse range of jobs as a PhD chemist. In hindsight, I look back at like I've touched like met know probably 100 PhD chemists. The function of being in such large labs. Now, 10 years out from that, I look at like LinkedIn and I see what all those people are doing. Some of them are at large companies, some of them at like small companies like myself. There's academia, there's national labs like yourself, there's government work, there's consulting. So there's a really wide, diverse range of jobs that you can potentially go into. Then, you know, are you geographically constrained? I wouldn't say that my heart was set on Chicago. I am happy that I got the opportunity to stay in Chicago. Like some people might be geographically constrained, maybe have a preference like I did. Um,
Yeah.
what does your department do? Like Northwestern has this industrial associates program. That's how I found out about NuMat. What does your department do? Who does your PI know? Who, you know, if there's a particular career role that you're interested in, has your PI trained somebody who is in that career now? Can you reach out to them? And then there's like 100 places you can start looking for jobs. So I don't know. That's not a very straightforward answer. I would say it's an exciting time to be a chemist looking for a job in industry. There's a lot of opportunities. Like you have the Inflation Reduction Act, which is funding lots of companies, right? You've got the DOE, which is seeing an explosion in funding. So there's a lot of opportunities within the DOE, I imagine, at national labs, but it's not always straightforward where to look for them.
Yeah, I think that really does hit a point. I think the your first point about, seek out the network that you may or may not realize you have, especially through your advisor and through the network that your lab creates, is a really powerful one that students can really capitalize. Um, so can you tell us, we're gonna just make a quick shift into a little bit of the other side. Can you tell us about work-life balance in industry versus, I guess, what you experienced as a graduate student or postdoc?
So graduate school, postdoc, certainly the start of my postdoc was like go, go, go. There was like a very big pressure to get results.
Mm.
And, there was like, if you're not in the lab, then you're not like doing enough work, right? And that might like, I don't know if that proliferates all the way through academia. I certainly didn't feel it in my undergraduate experiences, right? But maybe that's because I was an undergraduate and I was just unaware that there was a lot of people. But I basically spent a lot of time in the lab, into weekends as well. That was just the common expectation. Now, that's not the case in industry at a small company. I, have free time at weekends. Like I can't remember apart from like ACS meetings and garden conferences when I worked on a Sunday. Maybe one or two emails that need to be answered, right? But there's work-life balance that way. I would say that I focus on working harder. Like honestly, and in graduate school, I was very distractible, maybe, truthfully. So maybe I was there for 50 hours, but was only working 40 hours kind of thing. So I think that's very important. And also like your life will evolve right now. I have a wife and a kid who expect to see me, so that's very important. And I don't think it's sustainable from an academic perspective. Like if I had gone into an academic career, right, like I don't think I would have been able to sustain that as well. So I
Yeah.
do I do think work-life balance is important, very important. And that's something to consider when you're considering your career. It's like, it's probably a question you should ask in any interview, like, what is the work-life balance at this position? What are your expectations?
That's a really good piece of advice, I think.
Yeah.
So do you have any closing thoughts as we wrap up here? I appreciate your time and you sharing all of this advice and sort of your path with us. Do you have anything you'd like to close with?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, I think it's an exciting time to be a chemist looking for a job in industry. It's a daunting time. Like when you're looking for your first job, I remember I was super stressed out. Like, when are you going to be successful, right? But if you talk to people, you do the networking, you have these skills, you come prepared. I do think there's a lot of job opportunities out there, and they are kind of in these kind of non-traditional things that I hadn't thought about when I was looking for a job. Like I didn't think about working for the government or really like the breadth of small companies and large companies that are out there. So exciting time, but it's daunting as well.
Yeah. Yep. I remember that time very well. Well, thank you again, William, for your time. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask our interviewees in our upcoming videos, or you have a suggestion for someone you think we should talk to, you can email us at inorgcareerchats@gmail.com. And thank you all for checking this out, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, William.
Thank you.